At 93 years old, Cameroon's long-serving President Paul Biya has once again restructured the top ranks of his armed forces, and this time while staying thousands of miles away in Geneva, Switzerland. Now absent from public view for nearly 2 months on what was officially termed a brief private stay, Biya issued a series of presidential decrees promoting key military officers and reappointing the long-standing commander of the elite Presidential Guard, the unit directly tasked with his personal security. The timing of these moves stresses growing political tensions in Yaoundé, where rumors regarding the president's health and capability to govern continue to surface. Now, while government spokespeople maintain Biya remains in good health and is managing state affairs from abroad, opposition leaders argue that running a nation via remote decree creates a dangerous leadership void. So tactically, military reshuffles have long served as Biya's primary mechanism for maintaining stability, rotating high-ranking officers during periods of domestic friction or regional uncertainty to secure his position and prevent political drift. Joining us on this conversation, we have Agha-Nwi Fru, security expert in Yaoundé, Cameroon, and we will be joined by Lyonga Waterson, legal practitioner in Boué, Cameroon as well. Thank you so much, Agha, for joining us at this time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be part of the conversation.
It's always a pleasure to have you as well. So let's quickly start with the immediate security posture. We've talked about this, recently about how the president was missing back then for 45 days, and now it's been 2 months. So President Paul Biya has just promoted 5 colonels to the rank of brigadier general and reappointed Raymond Beko Abondo to head the Presidential Guard, all by decree from Geneva. So what is your take? Is this the move of a leader actively shielding his administration against potential internal threats? Or are we witnessing senior officials consolidating power around his absence? We have even asked that before, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think it's both. It's a little bit of both. But it does point a lot of speculation about this being a move to strengthen the grip on power, that the current regime has, but also to some sort of protect the powers that be, from any potential maybe uprising or protest and all that. But it's a decree. Military reshufflements are nothing new in Cameroon. We know that the military is one of the greatest assets that the current government has, including the president. In this country, we all know that the military is top priority, and that the military, especially the military, those at the top ranks of the military, they get VIP treatment. They get the best treatment amongst civil servants. So for me, it's not a big deal that he's appointing colonels, long-serving colonels, or promoting them to the rank of generals, especially Colonel Akono, who has been head of the Presidential Guard since 2013. I mean, he has served in that position for so long, and hearing today that he's been promoted to general, I don't think it comes like a surprise. It simply means perhaps that he has been doing his job very well, and then he is being given a tap on the shoulder. But when we look back at the moment that we are right now, it does give room for a lot of speculation. What is happening? Why now? Why is he doing all these appointments now at a time where there is a lot of speculation on social media about his whereabouts to begin with, whether he's alive or not, but even most importantly about his health. Even if he's alive, is he still up and working? And then now we have this So I think the act itself is not new. It's not a surprise, but the timing does give room for a lot of speculation. Yeah.
All right. Now, Biya has now been out of the country for nearly 60 days. Last time it was 45, 60 days and counting. And that is quite a long time for, a sitting president or a serving president to be out of the country. Opposition figures have actually argued that this creates a serious governance crisis, asserting that executive power cannot be effectively exercised from a hotel suite abroad, right? Now, from an institutional perspective, at what point does an extended absence abroad transition from a diplomatic stay into a constitutional challenge?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the opposition has a valid point here, but as the government will say, it's a little bit too early for them to draw conclusions. Why? Because according to the Constitution, it is only the Constitutional Council that has the right or the mandate to declare a vacancy, as far as the president's office is concerned. But the Constitutional Council has not yet pronounced itself at this level. So it is early, according to the government. But then we might want to question, what assurance do we need to know that the president is actually active, that even if he's not physically present, but at least the office of president is not vacant. How do you determine that? That's a huge question mark. And in this case, I think we just have to wait, because the government, the ministers, especially the Minister of Communication, which is a spokesperson of the government, has come up to say that there is no need, there's no call for concern, there is no need to worry. The president is active. He is actively doing his duties, even if it is from Geneva. But like I just mentioned a few moments ago, we can only but speculate, as long as the Constitutional Council hasn't come out to really confirm that there is a decession of power or there is a vacancy. Then it will only remain speculations. And for the meantime, we might just, stay patient and just deal with the information that the government is giving us. But one thing I want to say here is that nothing hides under the sun. Eventually, the truth will prevail, and we might just wait a little bit more to know exactly what's happening, because we will eventually know.
Yeah, because so many people have actually speculated that probably something has happened, and they're doing that, to protect themselves in case, any news comes up. But, like you said, we'll cross our fingers and, wait for more information on this. And, speaking of, we actually saw a similar military restructuring in Cameroon, shortly after a political overthrow in neighboring Gabon. West and Central Africa have experienced multiple coups in recent years. So how high is the risk of political instability in Yaoundé today, or even a coup today? And do high-level promotions, reliably secure military loyalty during periods of public uncertainty?
That one of the things that the government, the Biya government has done, is really to hold the military so tight, so close, that they have been able, to silence any tensions of possible uprising within the military, and just quench it at the earliest signals, so much that it doesn't even get to the public hearing or the public eye. That's one thing they have been good at. And I think that since the April 1986 coup, I think that was like the most outstanding coup that this government has had to deal with. I believe that they learned from that mistakes. They identified the loopholes that existed in the military, and they decided that will never happen again. And one of the strategy has been to appoint people from a certain ethnic group, those from the area where the president and most members of the government hail from, at top-ranking military positions. Because when you look critically at the generals in the country, most of them come from a certain particular region or regions, you know, they hail from a certain particular ethnic group. And that has been some of the strategies that they have taken, amongst others, like ensuring that the military, top-ranking military leadership is well remunerated, but also they have a lot of benefits attached to their positions. So there has been like a strategy to make the military loyal, even if it is mainly focused on the top-ranking leaders, you know, to build a certain degree of loyalty, so much so that they minimize the possibility of coups as much as possible. But does this totally wipe out the possibility of a coup? I won't say that. I won't say so. You know, but I would say that compared to the other neighboring countries, the current government in Cameroon has put in place so many measures to minimize the possibility of a coup d'etat. Yes, 3 years ago, when Elingi Nguema in Gabon toppled Ali Bongo's government, yes, I think one of the first reactions from Cameroon was to reshuffle the top, you know, brass of the military. And even last year, after the presidential elections, we equally saw a reshufflement, you know, of the military. The military is one of those bodies in this country that is very frequently reshuffled or, you know, adjustments made and all that. And I think that is strategic. For instance, we haven't had a new government in a long while.
Very long time.
But when it comes to the military, exactly, when it comes to the military, I think there is a very intentional strategy around maintaining loyalty and minimizing the possibility of any uprising.
Okay. So I'm being told that David Monda has joined us. He's a professor of political science, City University of New York. Thank you so much, David, for joining us at this time. Hello, David.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, Professor David. So
yes, I can hear you. Thank you for having me.
I can hear you now. Thank you for joining us. So let's hear your thoughts, first of all, on, you know, a sitting president being absent for over 60 days, you know, and ruling the country from abroad. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a major problem. I think you had it in Nigeria with, you know, President Tinubu, you know, for a while. And we currently have it, the similar problem, you know, in Cameroon. The major issue here I think as our previous speaker was talking about it, is this question, two questions here. One about gonna live forever. And there's a big question around whether he will, you know, whether he'll be able to continue in power and what happens after Biya is gone. I think that's a major challenge for the country, for Cameroon. A lot of power brokers are still not sure how to manage that transition because Cameroon has not had a democratic political transition for so long. But I think the other question is, what will the role of other institutions, and in this case, the most powerful institution, the military, be in navigating this transition? And therefore, I think, as you were mentioning earlier, we have a lot of this rotation of chairs, right? This circus of replacement of generals in the military in order for the president to be sure that the general's law might be a threat. I think the last one obviously will be, what is the role of France? For a long time, France has been a guarantor for a lot of these presidents in Francophone Africa that have been there for a long time. Now, will the Macron administration intervene with the Rapid Reaction Force as they used to do in the 90s? Or will France sit back and watch the unfolding situation in Cameroon? I think these are a lot of questions. But it's a very dangerous and difficult situation because nobody's sure about the health of the president. Nobody's sure about who's actually governing the country. And you have all these different factions within the institutions of government that are competing with each other.
Okay. So let me still speak to you, Professor Munda, because Communication Minister Rene Emmanuel Sadi publicly stated that the president is working normally and will return shortly. Shortly has done to 60 days and counting. But, you know, domestic reporting on the president's health was explicitly restricted 2 years ago. Now, does this level of information management shape public trust and political stability on the ground?
So it does not. And I think this is a very delicate question because the health of the president is a public concern. It's a going public concern. The people have to know what the health of the president, any president, whether it's in the US, in Nigeria, Kenya, or in Cameroon, the public has a direct imperative and interest to know what the president's health is. But at the same time, the president's also an individual like you and myself. They have personal records. And obviously, because it's the president, not all the president's health information can be publicly accessible. So I think what the communication minister has done is actually to add to the uncertainty of this current situation, because he's given an answer that's really a non-answer. And the answer he gave initially after 60 days is actually moot. And it's really generating a lot of space for misinformation in this area of social media, or in this era of deep fakes. It's leading to a lot of an environment of fear and uncertainty. And for a country, that's very problematic. So I think with the question about the president's health, there really needs to be a delicate balance here. So I think the communication and information minister, they really need to have a credible medical professional to speak to the public and provide some idea about what the president's health is and why he's taken so long outside of the country. But I also think in conclusion here that this is the importance of independent institutions. Because if the parliament was independent, if the legislature was independent, I think this is a good space for the legislature to nominate possibly a caretaker president, because the president's incapacitated. And I'm sure there are constitutional provisions that should be able to provide for this type of situation. And also the cabinet. The cabinet in many systems, have the power to, to vote and to declare the president incapable or incapacitated to perform his roles. But you see, in the case of Cameroon, the executive has emasculated many of these other institutions, be the judiciary, and in this case specifically, the cabinet, the president's advisors, and the legislature. And now we have this ongoing problem that's a big threat to the country.
All right. So I'm also told that we're joined by David Matsanga. He's an African affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Matsanga, for joining us at the moment. So let's go ahead and hear your thoughts, on how sustainable is a governance model reliant on remote executive decisions when facing, so many challenges like rising economic pressure among, its citizens?
First of all, thank you very much, the fellow panelists. I am in Helsinki, Finland, attending another African legal court process of another African, but I felt I should chip in here. I'm one of the few people who has been hunting down Paul Biya. I filed an application in London stopping Mr. Paul Biya ever to step in London for any medical treatment because he mistreats his people. That application is a summons, is not a warrant. That as soon as he steps in Charing Cross, I use the Pinochet law. If you step in there, you have been beating people in Cameroon, the judge in the constitutional court in the King's bench will call you to answer. So that one if the airplane ever steps anywhere on the soil of the British system, we shall impound him. So after that, he no longer comes this side in Charing Cross. To trace where Paul Biya is, you have to find out from the hospital where he used to go. And Paul Biya is just in Paris. I am in Europe and I've been looking for him and I put up my feelers. I found out where he's in Paris, but for records not to disclose because I've not been given authority to do so.
But we're being told that he's in Geneva, Switzerland, not Paris.
Last week he was in Paris. And then he was moved. You know, when you are in Geneva, the other part is France, the other part is Switzerland. So for me, what I know, because I've been here for 1 week, what I knew was he was. But even if he's in Geneva, this guy has mistreated people. This guy had done a non-referment, has actually abducted people all the way from Nigeria into Cameroon, locked them for life. 10 professors who could be helping the world with diseases and other things. They are dying there in Yaoundé. But the problem we have here is systems like this one of Paul Biya are many in African countries. Paul Biya has actually technically left us in a very bad state. And I believe the Cameroonian army, as my brother Monda was saying, anytime, if you see something like that in Central Africa and West Africa, you know something else is coming. A man cannot move away without a vice president whom he has handed over. He chose a vice president, but he never handed over. Nobody is coming out to tell us what is going on with this country. This country already has a war. The Southern Cameroon English speakers have nothing to say in this country. They have been beaten for the last 10 years, since 2016. I'm one of the few people who has been on this case for a long time. So I am very happy that I don't rejoice when somebody dies, and I will never rejoice because I'm not God.
All right. You speaking of, the vice presidency, it's one of the questions, I want to ask Agha. Agha, let's hear from you because we know that key executive positions, including a newly created vice presidency and announced cabinet updates have remained unresolved. So in practice, who's currently managing day-to-day governance within the presidency? Is it senior administrative officials like Secretary General Ferdinand Gongo or a narrower circle of advisors?
Publicly, people and me included, we rely on a lot of speculations in this country because there is very little information, that is provided. Officially, no one has come to say, oh, this is the person that is currently managing, the affairs of the presidency, or it is this group, or that group. That information has never been made public, but we're speculating that it is the Secretary General at the presidency of the Republic, who is, in this case, Ferdinand Gongo. He has had a presidential signatory right delegated to him at some point, and he is, despite not being the Prime Minister of the Republic, he has always been, been rumored or stood out as the right man or the second in command in the absence of the president. But according to our constitution, in the absence of the president, we know that it is the Senate. The Senate president, of course, was recently elected after the demise of Senator Nyadnji Fenji. He's the second in command. And after him, you have the president of the National Assembly, who himself is newly elected after the demise of Honorable Kavayeke Jibril, who held that position, for over, 30, 40 years. So that is what the Constitution says. But like I said, little or no information comes out. Nobody is clear on who is handling what. But if we have to limit ourselves with what Emmanuel Sadi, the Minister of Communication, said, he said business is going on as usual. Civil servants are showing up to their post of duty. High-ranking government officials are going about their work normally. And so there is no call for concern because the government is functioning as usual.
All right. So coming back to Professor Munda, you know, Cameroon serves as a major economic anchor in Central Africa. You know, they handle key transit routes for landlocked neighbors like Chad. So will this affect how regional bodies like ECOWAS and international trade partners assessing the stability of Cameroon's institutional continuity? Will it affect the route or whatever it is or whatever business they're doing right now? Will it affect them?
You know, I would think to the extent of uncertainty and to the extent that business people's ability to plan for the future and to plan for entry and exit of imports and exports, I think would be a big challenge. But you can imagine if a business person has been doing business in Cameroon for many years, this has been an ongoing concern, right? An ongoing problem and an ongoing challenge. So I think business people have had to just make these adjustments and hedge their bets. In other words, have contingency plans, assessing from best case to worst case scenarios. Worst case scenario in this situation might be you know, a deleterious, rapid collapse of, you know, President Biya, and then having you know, a significant power struggle. And obviously, a best case scenario would be, you know, a peaceful transition and handover of power by Paul Biya. But I feel at this point, because Paul Biya has been in power for so long, there's a lot of interest and a lot of players within the Cameroon political system that do not want to see him leave because they will lose their access to power. And if this transition for business people, for example, is not managed properly, if we don't have, you know, a strong central government and leader, we could even see Ambazonia, right, the breakaway territories of the country wanting to secede for independence. We could see civil chaos, and that really creates multiple problems for business people with looting, with insecurity, and obviously for neighboring countries, all the countries that depend on Cameroon for exports. We have a lot of international carriers, African carriers, Ethiopian Airways, ARIG from Nigeria, Kenya Airways, South African Airways that rely on Cameroon. So this will create its own major challenges for business people. But the whole question is this uncertainty and lack of a clear plan in terms of a political transition post Paul Biya.
Oh, okay. So let's come back to Dr. Masanga. Dr. Masanga, so we know that Geneva has frequently served as an extended base for operations, you know, of operations for President Biya over his decades in office. So if the executive office, for example, if it were formally declared vacant while the president is abroad, what constitutional protocols govern the transition?
My fellow panelists know that most of the time Mr. Paul Biya has been spending it outside. He has not been in. He comes, even when we played AFRICOM, our football on African continent, Paul Biya came from outside to open the matches, and in the morning he left. So he has been outside. But the problem is that the gap that Paul Biya will create, the chaos, as Professor Monda has said, the chaos that he will leave behind. Already, you know, the Ambazonians of southern Cameroon, the English-speaking Cameroon, wanted their country, which was their country anyway. And because of Aito, who just put everything together and confused everything, and the UN and other countries and in the United Nations General Assembly refused to recognize quickly. They recognized, but they were usurped. The power was taken away from the English-speaking countries. So we must prepare for a terrible transition in Cameroon. There are no clear pathways for transition. The opposition is muzzled. Opposition leader who almost won the election was kicked out. We don't know where he is. The people inside, each one, as professors say, want to fight for the power, and that will create a big problem. African Union, this is the time for peace, security, and the political departments of African Union. Unfortunately, that one also, African Union, is dead. The word DEAD is dead, is finished. It has nothing to do. It has watched this situation grow until we announce the coup. Commonwealth, where Cameroon is a member, the lady from Ghana who took over from the one from Bahamas became part and a parcel of Paul Biya's bandwagon. Went there, received maybe a lot of pleasant greetings and so on. She went back, kept quiet. Nobody has put up and imagined that if Cameroon goes to chaos, the whole of that region will be in chaos. We have Boko Haram coming up in that region, growing bigger and bigger. We have the insurgency of the Southwest, East, where people want a state. It could blow up, create us another Sudan of the West. So for me, I believe transitional arrangements are inadequate in Cameroon. We don't know, as the expert lady has said, you don't know who's who. And most of the people are in 90, 91 years, 89 years. For I saw the list was very, very serious list, which could bring us more confusion. So let's prepare for a catastrophe here.
All right, so let's hear from Agha, still on the same question, for example, if the executive office were formally declared vacant while the president is aboard, go ahead and speak to us. Does the Constitutional Council possess the operational independence to manage that process strictly by the book?
I personally don't think that the Constitutional Council could really act independently in this country, because who appoints the members of this Constitutional Council? It is still the president, so they kind of owe allegiance, to this president. And that is what we have seen over the years. We've seen over the years that the president or the executive has a strong grip, just like Professor said, over all the other arms of government, including the judiciary and even the parliament, which has a majority, landslide majority. That's what we're talking about here. Be it at the Senate, be it at the lower house of assembly, the ruling CPDM party dominates, clearly. And so power is maintained in such a way that as long as the decision has to come from this same group of people who are either appointed or, members of the ruling party, we cannot talk about independence yet. But I'd like to actually point out that now we have the position of vice president, even though it was created but not yet occupied. But after the president, or in the absence of the president, now we have, if a vice president is appointed, maybe any of these days, because we live in a country of little or no information, and so we are always living in a lot of speculation. There has been a lot of speculation about who will be the vice president of this country, given how much power that office holds. We have no idea who that's going to be. We have no idea when that person will be appointed. And so all of these question marks exist, and I can only tell you that time will tell. But if I want to be politically correct, as our Minister of Communication, Emmanuel René Sadi, has said, there is no call for concern. Everything is going on well. The president is just for a brief stay. He's still,
he's on vacation.
his brief stay in Geneva, and he will eventually come back soon. Soon, he will be back soon. So we might as well wait.
All right. So let's quickly hear from Professor Manda. Especially with key oppositions, or let's just keep the key oppositions, right? Historically, extended periods away from the capital can actually disrupt, intelligence gathering and political feedback loops, right? So, but does operating from abroad for months, and we're speaking insecurity here, we know it's all around us in West Africa. So does operating from abroad for months introduce operational blind spots from an administration's internal security apparatus?
It definitely does. And I think it exacerbates the problem of this transition, because the president's been outside the country for so long. The president is a symbol of national unity. So the individual Paul Biya, as with any executive office, is both the president as the person, right? The flesh and blood. But the president also occupies an institution we call the presidency. And when those two are separated, when the human being, the President Biya, is in Europe, and the institution at home is empty, that creates a vacuum. And we know politics, political systems abhor a vacuum. But I think I must add here, I'd be very interested, since we're speculating here, to find out what exactly is the role of Chantal Biya, because she's young, she's ambitious, and I think this the Cameroon situation really creates very interesting parallels with Grace Mugabe in Zimbabwe, right, where you had an octogenarian, very old president with a very young wife who was also politically ambitious. So it's very interesting to find out, what role Chantal Biya is playing within this uncertain political situation that we see in Cameroon. I think the second issue here that's very interesting is to find out, traditionally, Francophone presidents have tended to, immediately run to France for medical attention or for political support. So if the president's facing medical problems, President Biya, and he's gone to Switzerland, that also is raising some red flags. In other words, we know Switzerland is a haven for money laundering and for African presidents touching their loot from their countries. So is there a connection between this delicate and dangerous transition and maybe the president seeking medical attention in Switzerland, but also maybe preparing himself to settle his accounts in Switzerland from proceeds of the Cameroonian state? But I also think then, thirdly, what will the role of the military be? Because we know in Francophone Africa, there has become this new appetite for the military, very similar to what happened in West Africa in the 70s and 80s to take over power. We see it in the Sahel belt. So I think the military, even if Chantal Biya is to have a major role, will the military step in like they did in Zimbabwe and either take over power directly or have a bogeyman, have a puppet or a civilian individual that they can manipulate and have in that office? But I think the beginning of the end for Paul Biya is here and now. He cannot live forever, and I think this is a very difficult transition for Cameroon. And I hope it works out, but I think things will get a lot worse before they get better.
All right, I hear you there. Let's have final thoughts from Dr. Matsanga.
Thank you very much, the panel. I have been one of the people who wants great news coming out. But great news coming up and get more chaos is not very good. I agree with the professor that after this, there could be a problem. But for me, I encourage, there is a reason as to why the military was shuffled. Maybe you have discussed that because I came in later. Why was the military shuffled? Because from sources outside Cameroon, it indicates that the younger officers inside there were not happy and they were out for to slaughter, to pick up. They are fed up with a war. They have been fighting this war since 2016 with the southern Cameroonians who want their state to go. So for me, any news that can come, I'm not God, and I never celebrate and never wish somebody death. But as the professor says, the beginning of the end of Mr. Paul Biya is here. If you bring in the lady Chantel, I think you are making even matters worse. I predict, from my focus, I predict a young officer will come up to take over from Cameroon. There is likelihood to be that. And this could be close jesters who have been in the court before, like the one in Guinea-Conakry, the one in Gabon next, because all these officers are looking at examples. I think one of the closest person near Paul Biya seem to be eyeing. That's why there's that reshuffle in the military. Finally, I just want Paul Biya to do one thing. Pope Paul kissed his hand. And when Pope France, the current Pope, yeah. Pope, there are so many of them. When they kiss your hand, like they kissed my hand on the Uganda conflict, Pope Paul, you go and do one thing. Let him release prisoners. There are many, over 3,000 prisoners. The expert can tell you, who are in jail, who have been detained for life. So for me, I am one of the representative of 10 of them, the 10 Naira who were abducted from Nigeria. For me, any news that comes there, absent of Paul Biya, I would celebrate.
Okay. So I think with that, so we've actually, come to the end of the conversation. But, thank you so much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us and speaking on this. And we do hope that, the president comes back very, very soon to continue his duties. Agha-Nwi Fru, security expert.
Why does Africa want this man to come back?
Because he's the sitting president, so he should be back, right?
Yes.
Until the next election.
God should help Africa, surely.
Dr. Masanga, I know where you're heading, but we're not doing that here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, gentlemen and lady, once again. We appreciate you for your time. All right. I think with that, we'll be wrapping up the show. Thank you so much for staying tuned to the conversation. Do not forget to catch up on missed episodes on our YouTube channel. It's on News Central TV. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Until I come your way again, I'm Darshan Usman. Bye for now.